I know that lots of you still have questions, and we are going to be around for the whole week. So if everyone could settle down, because now I want to introduce one of my favorite people at FSA, Wood Mason. And so Wood's going to take it away with his presentation, and again, we'll take questions at the end.
Time out. All right, great. Okay. Hello, all my foreign school friends. I love being here with you guys. I was so happy that I got this chance this time around. I really enjoy seeing you when we have these things together and get to talk to you, see how things are going, how you're doing, and just to kind of chat for a little bit, to say hello. So I am a happy camper to be here, so thank you for asking me to do this. Most of you have been doing a lot of this stuff for 6 years. We rotated over to direct loans in 2010. And it's not like we're here to teach you how to do stuff today. What we're going to do today is we're going to run through some aspects of all of the parts of what has to happen for direct loans, okay? We're going to talk about origination, which you've been doing for 6 years. We're going to talk a little bit about MPNs, counseling, disbursements, some of the reports and some of the screens to give you an idea of how some of the information that you need or some of the information that will help you, you can find yourself on here quite easily and show you where to go for some of that information. So it's going to be more of a let's go over this stuff again type thing, just to remind you about this and kind of give you some insight into how to help yourself a little bit or how to decipher some of the things that happen as we go through the process of originating and dispersing loans for your American students. So that's what we're going to do today. And we're going to start off first with origination. And then, like I said, we're going to talk about MPNs, counseling, disbursements, and finally, reconciliation. We'll also touch a little bit on exit counseling, but not a whole lot. Reconciliation, we're not going to do a whole lot of either. You're going to have a session on reconciliation. And let me tell you, the lady that's going to do that reconciliation session, she is hot. She's hot. She happens to be my wife. So you kind of get the aspect of what I'm talking about here anyway. So anyway, she'll be in here one day this week to give you about reconciliation. And there's nobody that can give you a better session on reconciliation. So I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to touch on a few little things here. So let's keep going on this thing here. Origination is done by you. You're the ones that are going to determine whether you have eligible students, the program they want to go into is eligible, you're going to calculate the award, and you're going to send your origination disbursement, origination information to COD, okay? All of that preliminary stuff you're going to do at your school, and you've been doing that all along for the last 6 years. And you've done it by one of several different ways, actually 3 different ways. Some of you have software that you've gotten from a third-party vendor, right? Banner or DataTel, or some big piece of software that perhaps is integrated in your school system, but it's something that allows you to enter data in, it batches all that information up, and it's sent to COD, okay? There's also different ways of doing it with homegrown software. Some of you may have some of that. EdExpress could be something that you're using, one of the pieces of software that's created by a vendor, us, the Department of Education. A third-party servicer, perhaps some of you are using a third-party servicer to get your origination done and get it into COD for you. There's lots of different ways you can do it, including the direct loan origination tool. How many of you use the direct loan origination tool? A lot of you do, don't you? It's a pretty slick thing, isn't it? Works really well for you. But those are the ways that you do your originating, how you put together your awards. Directly on the COD website is another option if you're going to do one by one as well. So all of the originating has been going on for these last 6 years. You're doing it in one of these ways here. So it's not something that really is not familiar to you. The DLOT, as it says up here, is a utility, if you will, that's embedded in the COD website that allows you to put together a quasi-batch of students, right? And you send that quasi-batch of students to COD, and it's got not only the origination information in it, but it's also got your disbursement information in it. So you kill really 2 of the 3 areas we're going to talk about by doing it that way here. And there's some other information up here as well about the direct loan origination tool. Those of you that know it or use it know how it works. Those of you that don't, it may be something that you might want to look into one of these days. Might be something that could make your originating and disbursement, at least at this stage of the game process, a little bit easier on you, okay? Let's keep moving on here. It's a quite visible way of doing things, you will, if that's not the right word to use. Basically, you're going to have students at your school that you pick from, that you create this quasi-batch with. Yeah, add some of the cost of attendance profiles to it, disbursement profiles, all that information through this utility, and then it goes off to COD. So it's a very handy way of doing your originations through this direct loan origination tool. Little thing up here that shows you where, if I can get up here without screeching like a hawk. On this side on the left is where you would see the students that have designated your school as a recipient of their CPS information, okay? And from that list on the left, you would select those students. They would go over onto the right where your batch is going to be created, your draft batch. And from that point on, you would go to add the various aspects of it, such as cost of attendance profiles and other types of profiles that would allow you to finish those students in that draft batch, send it off to COD. That batch is done. Now, you can't disperse through that, can you? But you can go into each individual award and disperse. You can go to the action queue and disperse, which is a very handy way of doing it. So even though you can't do everything through this little tool, you can do most of what you need to do till you get to the disbursement part. So it's a handy little thing here, and like we did earlier on with everybody raising their hand practically in here, it's something that a lot of you used. There is no such batch name of Donald Duck. It was not accessed by Goofy. Those are fake names, so don't get any ideas that we have people like that in financial aid. You can also originate an award with a legacy way of doing it, and that is creating awards individually on the COD website. How many of you do that from time to time? Some of you do, right? You go through the process of creating the person if they're a new person, creating their award, setting up the disbursements, right? And submitting it right straight to COD after you get done with that. It's edited at that point. If you don't have everything set proper, COD is not going to take that origination. It's going to tell you that there are errors that you need to fix before you can successfully submit it. So this is just a little bit different way that you would create an origination and get it into the COD system, right directly on the COD website itself. And it's a very easy and straightforward process, as most of you know. You pick your person, create a new award form if they're already on the database, and go through the process of making that award for them and getting ready to send it in to COD. You can even do a skeleton award in the COD. I don't know if any of you have done this, but for a parent borrower that has gone out and done a plus request on studentloans.gov, the SP response that we send you, you could import that into the COD website and it'll make a skeleton plus award for you as well. There's a whole lot of different ways that you can originate awards. You guys use the DLO tool, you've used some vendor software out there, some of you do it individually. It's what you've been doing for a while. So we're not going to spend any more time really on much of that at all. Couple of things about that origination, and I bring this up because this just happened last week. A school called me and talked to me about it. When you originate a loan, you also have to include disbursements equal to the loan amount, either anticipated or actual or a combination of the two, and they have to be substantially equal when you originate. Last week I had a school that called me. They had a $10,000 award, and their first disbursement was $8,500 in the first term and $1,500 in the second term. You can't do that. You can't front load awards, okay? Substantially equal disbursements when you originate the award. If you need to do something like that, you can do that by originating a single term loan based on the cost of attendance for that term, and then a subsequent loan if you need one for that term as well. So you can do what you need to do, and in some cases you probably do need to do it that way. But when you originate the loan, you've got to originate in an amount equal to the loan and in substantially equal disbursements, okay? So make sure we do that. There's no edit in COD that'll stop you from front loading an award. But you shouldn't do it because you're not supposed to. Just give you a little heads up on that one there. Let's talk a little bit about credit when it comes to PLUS loans. All Direct Plus borrowers have to undergo a credit check. And there are specific criteria in the direct loan program that identifies what is called adverse credit history. And that deals with, over the previous 5 years, things such as a bankruptcy or a federal loan lien, a forfeiture, several other things that you can see if you look it up in the regulations. It'll tell you exactly what to look for when it comes for adverse credit history, or what constitutes adverse credit history. There's also an aspect that goes back for 2 years based on delinquent accounts. If there aren't anything or isn't anything that falls into those two areas, there's no adverse credit history, and that PLUS borrower is going to be accepted from a credit perspective. No income to debt ratio. Don't look at loan amounts. Don't look at FICO scores. Don't look at anything except what is in the regulations that says is adverse credit history. But every PLUS borrower has to go through that credit check to make sure that they don't fall into one of those buckets where they have an adverse credit history. And that credit check is good for 180 days once we do it. It's a valid credit result, and it'll stay on the system for 180 days. If you were to go back and do another credit check within that 180-day window, we wouldn't first go out and do another one. We would look first on the COD system if there was a good result there, a valid one, and we would use that one, okay? So it's going to sit on there for 180 days. But every PLUS borrower is going to undergo a credit check. Got some other information up here as well. You got to have an acceptable credit decision before you can disperse. And this talks about it here, an initial credit decision of accepted. Or if it isn't accepted initially, they have to have an endorser or successfully appeal that credit decision before you can disperse on it. They also have to do a session of PLUS counseling, okay? So there's several things that they can do to make themselves eligible for that PLUS loan in spite of having adverse credit history. But they have to do one of those things in order for you to be able to successfully disperse funds to those folks. Once you have that PLUS loan that has been, let's say, endorsed, you cannot increase that loan or disperse more than that endorser says he or she will endorse. If your borrower says, I need $38,000 for my student, but the endorser on this credit history that's adverse person says, I'm only going to endorse $20,000, how much can you make the award for? $20,000. You can't go over what that endorsed amount is. If they come back and say, but I really need that $38,000, well, then you need to do another loan for the difference. You're going to get another adverse credit response, denied credit, and they're going to need another endorser or a successful appeal to be able to get all the money that they want. Okay? Let's keep going. Everybody with me on origination? Any questions on origination? Okay. Let's talk about MPNs here very quickly. An MPN must be completed by your borrower and linked to their award before you can disperse. If you try to disperse before you get a good MPN linked to their award, it'll reject. Can't disperse without an MPN. There are 2 MPNs that we look at in the direct loan program. One is for Stafford loans, subs and unsubs, and one is for plus loans. If it's a plus loan, you use a plus MPN, of course. If it's a Stafford loan, sub or unsub, you use one for that as well. We link those on the first 2 characters of the first name, the social security number, and the date of birth of the borrower. Okay? Now, keep this in mind as well. You guys use what is called single year functionality on your MPNs. That means that your borrowers have to have a new MPN every academic year, right? Okay. Not only do your loans link on the first 2 characters of the first name and the social security number of the borrower and the date of birth, but it also links on the start and end dates of your academic year and your G code in the loan ID. If those all don't match, you couldn't put a subsequent unsubsidized loan or subsequent sub loan on that same master promissory note. It would reject when you tried to disperse on it. Okay? So that's another thing to keep in mind. You are single year functionality schools. You have to have an MPN for each academic year. Student may come in and say, but I just did one for XYZ school over here. Doesn't make any difference. It's got to be for your school. And it's got to be for every academic year that they are going to be there. This is here what we just talked about as well. How many of you send your students to studentloans.gov to do their MPNs? Pretty much everybody, huh? Best way to do it. Best way to do it. Easiest and fastest, we're going to send you a response as soon as it's done to let you know that we've got a completed MPN on the database. You can look at it on the COD website. I think I got a slide that'll show you that up here a little bit later as well. You can see what loans are linked to it. If you have 1 loan linked to it, or 2 loans, or perhaps 3 or more loans linked to it, it'll identify those loans. So you can get a lot of information on the loans themselves on the COD website by pulling that MPN up. When you look at it, as I said a minute ago, you'll be able to see over here, that's really dim, isn't it? You'll be able to see over here which awards are linked to this particular master promissory note. And you can see that we're going to get only loans that match the academic year start and end dates that you can see up there, and the G code in the loans. I didn't put that up there, but that is these X's right here. So not only if they tell you I've got one, I already did one, I can see it, you can go out and see it as well. And you can see all the information you need to see on that MPN by pulling it up in COD. There's a lot of information in COD that you can go to and get yourself to help you. Okay, any questions on MPNs? You guys are good. Okay, let's talk about entrance counseling. This is always a fun subject. Entrance counseling is required for a first-time borrower, and you cannot disburse to a first-time borrower until he or she has completed entrance counseling, right? For plus borrowers, a first-time plus borrower also has to undergo entrance counseling. Parent plus borrower doesn't have to do any of that. They're exempt from doing any kind of counseling. So what if that borrower comes back to your school for another year? Do you send them back to entrance counseling that second year? Very good. Very good. You guys are sharp. Okay. Requirement for first-time borrower. Again, we're going to send you a response and let you know that it was completed, right? If they do it on studentloans.gov. Studentloans.gov is great. It's got all the stuff there that your borrowers need and that you need to stay on top of what's going on as well. Anyway, there's our entrance counseling. There it is, available at studentloans.gov, meets all the regulatory requirements, covers all the topics. I just said that we send you a response. And a student can even send another copy of that MPN to you, or that response to you if you need to. Okay? The response will tell you who it was that you would see up here, although I blacked it all out up there, or blued it all out, I guess. But it also gives you all the information you need over here on the note as well. School information, student information down here, and the counseling type that that person underwent. This person underwent undergraduate counseling, Stafford counseling for sub or unsub loan. Award years 2016, 2017, and the date completed September 1st, 2015. Okay, entrance counseling. Can you require them to do it a second time? No. Nope, can't do that. Can't do that. Okay, let's talk about disbursements a little bit here as well as we go through. This is something that sometimes gives people a little bit of trouble. Disbursement is a defined concept. It is a specific and unique date. A disbursement occurs when you credit your student's account in the business office or whatever office handles that aspect. When that account is credited, that is the disbursement date. If you draw funds on the 6th and you credit that student's account on the 8th is the date of disbursement. Doesn't vary 1 or 2 or 3 days on either side of when you draw the money. It doesn't vary when you get around to it maybe a week later. The date that you credit that student's account is what we look at as the date of disbursement. Okay? And I've got a definition of it up there, so you have that. That's something you need to be really, really mindful of what that date is. And the date that you financial aid folks send to COD as the actual date of disbursement has to match dollar and date exactly as what's in your business office. If the financial aid system says you dispersed on the 8th, then your business office has to show that you credited his or her account, your student account, on the 8th as well. Okay? Can't vary. Can't vary a day, can't vary a dollar. They've got to match exactly. Do you have a question?
When it comes to the foreign school, we credit our students 2 amounts. There's the loan amount, and then there's the
Credit balance.
The difference in the exchange. Does it matter that the exchange date is the same?
Good question. What she said was that you guys credit your student's account in your business office on a certain date. And then a few days later, a week later, certainly within 14 days later, you cut a check to that student for their credit balance. What was left over after the tuition and fees were paid to the school, right? And your question was, can that date be different than the disbursement date? And the answer is yes. That is a totally different process. You're giving that student his or her credit balance, money that they're due, out of that disbursement, but you made that disbursement on a specific date, and that's the date that has to be reflected in your financial aid system and your business office and the date you send to COD.
It's helpful, but that's not actually what I meant.
Oh.
Difference in currencies. So it comes in American dollars.
Oh, you're talking about currency exchange. I don't really do currency exchanges. If I did currency exchanges, I would be poor because I don't understand them half the time. We'll let Mike answer that.
For currency exchanges, we will talk about it briefly tomorrow in the cost of attendance session. But you would be able to need to document the exchange rate that you use so we can match that to COD. There is some flexibility you have with the currency exchange rate. So when you originate that loan initially, the currency exchange rate may be X, and then when you're ready to disperse that, it may be completely different. And you are allowed to make adjustments at the time of disbursement as long as you're consistent with all students and you make that adjustment every single time. So sometimes it will be to the advantage of the school, sometimes it will be to the advantage of the student. You win some, you lose some, you just have to make sure that you're consistent with that.
Got it? Okay. Thank you, Michael. Okay, an anticipated disbursement is a pending disbursement. One that has a disbursement release indicator is false. That means that it hasn't been given to anybody yet. It hasn't been processed. It's not an actual disbursement. Whereas an actual disbursement is one where the disbursement release indicator is true, and that is an actual disbursement. That generates the funding for you guys, right? Because all you guys are records first schools. So until you get actual disbursement data into COD, you ain't got no money. There's none that's going to be generated and put in your G5 account for you to draw from. So the actual disbursement with the disbursement release indicator flagged as true as opposed to that one being false is when the funding process starts for you guys. And that's what you want to happen. And you can send that actual disbursement data to COD up to 7 days ahead of the actual disbursement date. And that'll give it time for the funding process to take place and generate that available balance for you in COD. Okay? That's what records first means. When we talked a little bit earlier about disbursements, and about originations, we talked a little bit about the action queue. How many of you are familiar with the action queue at your school? Good, good. The action queue lists all the anticipated or pending disbursements that are in your system for your school.
And the people who doesn't sign the NPN also.
The people that don't sign the MPN, well, you haven't dispersed to those people yet.
Yeah, but it's like a red message. Like,
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, you're right. You can also see up here on the left, that, well, this is not going to, we have a little box. That you can select to disperse or release that disbursement from the action queue, right? So that's one way of dispersing. We talked a little bit about origination and those being here. Now you can see where we can select there to make those disbursements happen as well. The only thing is that once you select that box, you can't make any changes over here on the disbursement amount or disbursement date. So if you need to do something like that, you'll need to go into the record itself of this direct loan and make the changes there on the disbursement tabs, which you can do, and just go ahead and release it after that as well. Here's a little bit more about actual disbursements. We talked about it, driving funding, how often or how you can send it up about 7 days ahead of time. We also talked about the actual date of disbursement matching every place. And if you find that you have to make a change to that date, you can make a change to that date to make sure that you're all on the same page of the songbook when it comes to dispersing. You and your business office, and the date is also consistent as the one that you sent to COD. Okay, we talked about records first, as well about getting the actual disbursement data in to generate your funding. One thing there, that last bullet, a lot of times we'll get inquiries about, I sent this in and it went through to COD, but I don't see any increase in my G5 balance, okay? That should tell you that that disbursement, for whatever reason, didn't go through, right? It was rejected. And what you need to do is go find why it rejected, look up that edit code, and see what you need to do to fix it, and then resubmit it. And when it's accepted, that'll bump up your current funding level in COD, and that'll bump up your available balance in G5. And there's your money to draw down to disperse to that student. Okay. Little information here to show you how to look for things like that. This is a batch search screen here that shows you different ways of searching. The top box will allow you to search by type, by dates, things of that nature. For you guys, though, generally speaking, if you have something like that happen, you're going to know who it happened to, right? You're going to know who that student is that you're having trouble with. And you can put his or her social security number down there in that third box on the bottom, and that's going to pull up all of the batches that that student is in for the award year that you select there as well. And you'll be able to see what happened to that student. Let's get to see where we can get to that. You'll be able to see what happened to that student when you select that batch that he or she is in and see why he rejected. And once you select that rejected record, it'll tell you disbursement amount is less than or equal to 0 for the sequence number that you're sending in. That is a hard reject. The disbursement amount is less than or equal for both of them. Something happened here where you tried to submit a disbursement of 0, and it rejected. And if you look in the FSA or in the student COD technical reference, you can see what that 062 edit code means and how to fix it. And you can go right back into that award, go to the disbursement screen, make the change that you need to, submit it again. It'll go in, it'll bump your CFL, and it'll bump your available balance in G5. And it's all of 5 minutes to go look and see what happened, go back and fix it, and you're going back down that road again. Okay, let's keep going. Some of the reports also show you what we're looking at when it comes to disbursement information. An actual disbursement list, as you can see up here. You can select that as well. That'll pull up the most recent by hitting that big, heavy blue thing, the most recent disbursement list, and it'll show you up there as well who has been recently dispersed. You'll have the school ID for you guys, borrower's name, loan type, the award ID, all the information on the disbursements that you just made in that one report. You're just going to go over to your school news box like we showed here a few minutes ago, select it, and pull it up. There's lots of information in COD for you to look at. Lots of information there to help you in things like this here as well. Okay, award disbursements information. This is another way to look at the disbursement I was talking about a while ago. Right here's your little select boxes on the left. By selecting those, that's going to turn those pending disbursements into actual disbursements also. This is through the disbursement tab though, not the action queue. This is the disbursement tab on that particular award. You can disperse at that point also besides the action queue. This is probably the way most of you do it, I would suspect. Go into the award itself and the disbursement and making that disbursement an actual disbursement. Mentioned this a few minutes ago. If the dates change, if there's anything that changes to where you're not all in sync in the financial aid system and in your business office, you need to get with him or her, whoever is doing it in that office, vice versa, and make sure that you can agree on the date that needs to be reflected as the actual date of disbursement, because they have to match exactly. Barbara will tell you all about that tomorrow. She knows more about that than anybody. Once you get that disbursement in, once we have all the things that we need, you've already got an origination, you've got an MPN that came in that was signed, the MPN linked to the loan, you've made the disbursement and it goes into COD and is accepted, that loan is a booked loan. That means that the money that you drew down to pay that student is now the liability for that money is no longer on you guys, it's on us at the department. Actually the Treasury, but you know what I mean. That takes you out of the loop. You're no longer liable for those funds. So what you want to do is make sure that once you originate a loan for somebody, that they sign an MPN for you, that you can disperse that, and that disbursement is booked, and you're no longer liable for those funds. So that's a process you want to make sure goes straight through and as swiftly and as surely as you can make it. Okay, anything on disbursements? You guys are probably doing the disbursements pretty much. Yes?
There was something on one of your slides about doing the disbursement within the date within 15 days, making the change within 15 days. 15 days of which date?
Okay, that's a good point. You asked about a 15-day change to something or something that you saw about 15 days. The regulations say that when you make a disbursement, okay, you have 15 days that we call a reporting window. In other words, you have 15 days to get that disbursement information into COD. As well, any adjustments to that disbursement have to be into COD within 15 days of those adjustments being made. So the reporting window is 15 days for either disbursements or adjustments to a disbursement, or you knowing that you need to make an adjustment to a disbursement. If you know you should have made that disbursement $100 instead of $500, but you don't get around to doing it until 3 weeks later, technically you're okay because you're sending it in, but that change is going to go all the way back 3 weeks ago. And it should have really been in within 15 days. Okay? Everybody with me on that? Any more questions on it?
Actually, I have a lot of schools that have a misunderstanding of the cash management regulation of the 3 days versus the actual date of disbursement.
Okay.
And if you could clarify for everyone how those two interact and what it means and what it doesn't mean.
Okay. I don't know if I can clarify anything anymore, but I'll try. The 3 days that you're referring to in the cash management regulations are what we look at as what we call immediate need. As advanced cash schools, you guys are all advanced cash schools. Most of you are advanced cash schools. That's a funding method. That means that when it comes time to disperse, you calculate that immediate need, how much you're going to need to disperse, and then you go draw those funds and make the disbursement. Okay, let's say that on tomorrow you're going to disperse $15,000. That's your immediate need. And you go draw those funds from G5 and they hit your bank account tomorrow. From tomorrow, you have to have dispersed that $15,000 to those recipients within 3 business days. That's immediate need. Anything that you have beyond that that you're able to disperse is excess cash, unless there's somebody else that pops up in those 3 days that you can give that money to. Okay? So that's the 3-day rule. There's some features of that 3-day rule that say, well, you can actually keep it another 7 days if you have like 1% of how much you drew down last year, particularly on the second Tuesday of the month, all sorts of stuff like that. Basically, 3 days is all that you can hold the money you draw from G5, okay? That's the first part. The date of disbursement is the date that you credit that student's account with his or her funds that you've drawn from G5, or that you've used your own funds, or whatever you use to pay him or her.
So if the date of disbursement was, say, November 29th, you got the funding from G5, you drew it down, but you didn't post the funds until December the 2nd, you would need to use the functionality of updating the disbursement date to December the 2nd, correct?
Correct. Everybody get that? And that's because all of those databases, if you will, your financial aid system, the business office, and COD all have to reflect the actual date that you dispersed those funds. And that's the date you credit that student's account. It's not the credit balance. Credit balance you may not give to him or her for 2 weeks. You got 14 days basically. But the date of disbursement is the date of disbursement. Okay.
How does that affect when the disbursement occurs, the loans originated before the 1st of October, but it's dispersed after the 1st of October once the fees have changed?
How do you handle a loan where you've originated it to originally to disperse before the fees change on October 1st, but you haven't dispersed it yet, so now you got to fix it, right? Okay. In order to fix it, basically you got a couple of ways of doing it. My friends up here in the front row kind of listen to what I'm saying here. You can do one or two things. First thing is you can reduce the disbursements, reduce the loan amount to 0. That is deactivating the award or inactivating the award. At that point, you can change the origination fee, reactivate the award by bringing it back up to the amount that you were going to disperse and with the disbursements. Okay, that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is going in and reducing the disbursements to 0, reduce the loan amount to 0 because you're inactivating that award just like we did before. But instead of changing the origination fee, you create a second award in the amount that you want to disperse with the disbursements with the correct origination fee. And then that's the one that you disperse. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Right?
Yeah, the only thing, you do it in 2 steps, like you just said, reducing the disbursements and then the award, you'll get the new added 219.
Oh, that's, yeah. Okay. Okay. Somebody else had a question.
I need to get some clarity on what you spoke about in terms of the 3 days.
Okay.
So we disperse, and then the money comes into G5, and within 3 days we have to draw the money down.
No. When you disperse, that starts generating the funding process.
Yeah.
Okay? And over the course of the next several days, at some point in time, your CFL is going to increase, and that's going to increase your available balance in G5. And that available balance in G5 is what you're going to draw down to pay those students that you started this whole process with. When you draw those funds down and they hit your bank account, you have 3 days in which to disperse all those funds. Or else you have to, whatever you don't disperse, you have to return to G5. Okay. Make sense? Okay. Say that again.
I thought it was 3 days, once you draw down from G5, you have 3 days to apply to student accounts, and then 14 days to issue a refund if it's due, right?
Yeah, but we're talking about two different things here. When you draw down funds to disperse, let's say you're going to pay a student, his disbursement is $10,000, and he's the only student we're going to disperse today, okay? So you draw down that $10,000 from G5, because you've already sent in the actual disbursement, the money is there. You draw down that $10,000 from G5, you have 3 days in which you can disperse those funds to that student. If you don't disperse that student within 3 days of those funds hitting your bank account, then it turns into excess cash, and you have to send those funds back. Good question. The second part of that question is, what is the disbursement that takes place within 14 days of that? Well, that's not a disbursement that takes place in 14 days from that. You've already made the disbursement to the student. You dispersed the funds that cover his tuition and other fees in the business office by crediting his or her account, and let's say that was $5,000. And now you got $5,000 that's left out of that $10,000 disbursement that is called a credit balance. And that credit balance has to be given to that student, a check, a bank card, cash, ever how you're going to give it to him or her, has to be provided to him or her within 14 days. So if you make the disbursement on the 1st, you make... Correct. The disbursement is applying the funds to the student account. What's left over is a credit balance.
I know, but I thought, okay, so everything is called a disbursement, but there's like 3 or 4 different kinds.
No, they're not. Everything's not called a disbursement. When you pay that student account, that's the disbursement of those funds.
Okay, and then I have to go back into the pod and change all the dates in there?
For what reason?
Well, if I, for example, if I flip the release indicator to true on September 1st,
Okay.
and I got 5 persons worth of money arriving in G5 on the 3rd.
When you flag that disbursement as actual on September 1st, what's the actual date of disbursement in that record that you're sending to COD? You can send that 7 days ahead of the date that you're going to disperse to that student. That's why we're doing this.
Okay. I don't want to take up everyone's time, but I don't want to
Okay, well, we need to talk, and we'll talk about that.
Interesting also for us. We were discussing it. So you said that the G5 will make the money available 1 week before the disbursement date.
No. Let's start over. I have a student that I'm going to disperse, okay? And that student's date of disbursement, pending date of disbursement, is September 8th. And that came about because when I originated his loan 3 months ago, the pending disbursement date was September 8th. Remind me what dates I'm using here because I'll forget it, okay. On September 1st, you can change the disbursement release indicator on that disbursement, or check the box, ever how you do it, and send that to COD on September 1st, reflecting an actual disbursement date of September 8th. So you can send it in 7 days ahead, you can, of the actual date of disbursement. Okay, over that course of time, your CFL is going to increase because we're going to start the funding process. And when that CFL increases, we send that information to G5, and that available balance increases in the amount of that actual disbursement that you sent in. And we'll use $10,000 as the example, okay? So now there's an available balance in G5 of $10,000. And let's say it's, I don't know, September 12th. Well, I know, but I'm changing the date. Stay up. Okay. Couple of things has to happen now, right? The money comes into your school still on September 8th, but you're not going to disperse it until September 12th. Well, that money that came into your account on September 8th is now 4 days old, right? So that's excess cash. So it should have been sent back or it should have been dispersed. So now we know what the excess cash rule means. So let's take another little look at it. Let's say you got the cash and now it's September 8th, the money's in your bank account, and you're going to disperse that student just like you plan to disperse him or her on September 8th. So you go over to the business office and tell them you need to credit this student's account. The business officer credits that student's account on September 8th, just like you reported to COD, right? Now you have money left over after that account is credited for tuition and fees. Say it was $5,000. Now you have a credit balance of $5,000, right? That's what's left of that $10,000. Now you have 14 days to give that $5,000 to that student. But that's not a disbursement. That's just providing him or her with the credit balance. The disbursement took place on the 8th. Tell me if you don't understand. Do you understand that?
I basically understand, but I have never done it in advance. I've always done it on the day, got it the next day, dispersed it the same day, and I've never done anything in advance. That's why I'm confused about.
You can do it in advance.
But I don't have to.
You don't have to. If today is September 8th and you're going to disperse on September 8th, and you send that disbursement to COD to start the funding process, are you going to have the funds on December or September 8th? You won't. Excuse me. No, you usually.
Let's just say it's another calendar day later.
Okay.
In that case, I still have, if I disperse on the 8th, if I flip the indicator on the 8th, it arrives in my bank account on the 10th. I have to go back in time and change it to the 10th, right?
Yes. If that's the date that you credit his or her account, then you need to go back and change that September 8th to September 10th.
But not if I do it in advance.
No. Whatever you report to COD is the actual date. That's the date that all three places have to have.
Okay, so under what circumstance would I not have to go back into time and change it?
If you dispersed him on September 8th, they credited his account on September 8th, and that's what you sent to COD as the actual date of disbursement.
Before it arrives in G5?
No. If you do that before it arrives in G5, you're not making it a disbursement because you have no money to credit the student's account with.
When you put the release indicator on, you say, I want my money to be released on this day.
You want the disbursement to be on that day.
Yeah, so if not, when you flip on your indicator. If that doesn't match the date, you can credit your account and get applied to those two. It's not the day you're changing the indicator.
Okay, let's everybody, are you clear on what we were talking about? You are. Okay, you're sure? You're not jerking my chain here now or anything? There you go, there you go. Simple rule. When you disperse funds, the date that you credit the student's account has to be the same date that you show in your financial aid software that you disperse the funds. And that has to be the date that you sent to COD. Maybe she is. We'll see. Okay. Oh, now I have no idea what I did with the clicker. All right, who's got my clicker? Oh, okay. Did you take that from me? Okay. There you go.
Clap on, clap off.
Okay. Did we have a disbursement? Okay. That date right there is the disbursement date. You can send that disbursement record to COD 7 days ahead of that date. But you're sending that disbursement date, okay? Once it gets to COD, that's 7 days ahead of time, that'll start the funding process that will bump your CFL and COD, that will make your balance available in G5, okay? When you pull those funds from G5, those have to be dispersed within 3 days, but you've already told us you're going to disperse on January 3rd, okay? So if you don't get the funds before January 3rd, when you can do what you say you're going to do, then when you get the funds and make that disbursement, then you're going to change that date to match what your business office is. Does that make sense? You sure? All right. Everybody with me? Please say everybody is with me. Oh. Hold on a minute. So, oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, so say my disbursement date is the 8th of September.
Okay. Disbursement date 8 September.
8th of September.
Okay.
And you're saying that I can go and change the indicator to true 7 days in advance.
Correct.
Okay. So I do it on the 1st of
September.
1st.
Okay.
So that would trigger the funds to come into G5.
That would trigger the funding process that will result in funds being available for you to draw from G5. Correct.
So from experience, it takes around 1 to 2 days. So I'm just assuming that by 3rd, the money would be in G5.
Okay.
Then I draw it down.
Okay.
Then it takes 2 to 3 days to come into the bank account. 2 days.
Okay.
The 3rd week,
Okay.
it's in the bank account.
Okay.
I organize the paperwork
Okay.
for the date,
Okay.
transfer journal.
Okay.
It's
On the 8th.
on the 8th.
Okay. You credit that student's account on the 8th.
Tuition fee account, and any balance that is remaining within 14 days goes to the student's bank account.
Correct.
Towards the date.
Correct. Did everybody hear that? Oh, of course not. Yeah, she said what I said. She has a disbursement date of September 8th. She sends it in on September 1st. The money arrives in G5 on September 3rd. She draws the money down and it hits her bank account on September 6th. Okay? So at that point, she's got 3 days to disperse, right? On the 8th, the date that she initially sent to COD, she credits that student's account, and 14 days later, she gives him or her his or her credit balance. Right? Is that right? Is everybody with me on that? Okay. Is there anybody that's not clear? I want to make sure we're clear on this, because this is a biggie. This is cash management regulations, and you've got to play by the rules when it comes to cash. Yes?
When you say 14 days, you mean calendar days, right?
14 calendar days, correct. Excess cash is 3 business days. The credit balance is 14 calendar days. Okay? Yes?
If the student wants it, I have a lot of students who say they don't know, but you're making it so it has to go back.
You have to make it available to the student in 14 days. If he or she says, why don't you hold it for me and I'll come pick it up when I need it, have them write that down for you, and that's fine. Okay, I hear a lot of whispering. Is everybody with me now?
Yes.
We're still okay?
Wood,
Ma'am.
I'm sorry to interrupt. So this session is scheduled to end at 5, and I know there's been masses and masses of questions. I don't know if people want to go on for a few more minutes. I do want to let everyone know that the session... Yeah, Wood's going to be here on Thursday when we do the Q&A, the one that we discussed with you earlier today. So that might also be a time to get your questions answered, because we know it's a really important topic, and there's a lot of information. So How
That's
much
fine with
more
me.
did you have to do, Wood?
About 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay, so if you can stay for 3 or 4 minutes and let Wood finish up, that'd be great, and we'll take any other additional questions on Thursday.
Okay, reconciliation. There's going to be a hot lady that's going to come in here and give you a reconciliation session. So all I'm going to say is, you got to do it, okay? Whatever you draw down eventually has to agree with what you dispersed. That's reconciliation. The ins and outs, the hows to do it, the tips, the tricks, and all of that kind of information, I'm going to let her tell you about that. So for all intent and purposes, we're done. Now, I'm going to hang around a while if anybody has more questions before we leave tonight, and then we'll finish up with more on Thursday, right?
Thursday, it's the last session that we have scheduled in the foreign school track on Thursday. So Wood's kindly going to stay for a few more minutes, but thank you so much for today. We appreciate seeing so many of you here, and we will see you again tomorrow. Enjoy your evening.